It's podcast o'clock. Hi everyone, welcome to my podcast. This is Oma's Diary, where I chronicle my journey as a broadcast journalist. How are you? I am Oma, your very sweetheart on radio, TV, social media, sweetheart everywhere. Okay, so it's so good to have you join me on this beautiful podcast. And I'm just wondering, where would you be at 82? What would you be doing at 82? Have you ever wondered, will you still be alive on earth at 82? Of course, I know that a lot of persons that are 82 and who will stumble on this podcast and they will listen to it and they will feel so alive. My goodness, have you ever wondered within yourself where you would be at 82? Amazing. Think about it. Like think. Okay, so at 82, it was really inspiring. It was a time of history, right? It was I don't know. I'm looking for the right words, the right adjectives to qualify what I'm about to tell you right now. It was really, it was like a catalyst, right? Seeing a man at 82, a wise man at 82, a man who still carries out his duties at 82, a man who still has got his official engagement still at 82. I know you're wondering, what is Oma talking about today? Who is she talking about today? Oma, come out now. All right, you want me to come out, right? Okay, let's just take a breather. Like when we come right back, I will come out just like you want me to come out. I'll come out. Stay with me.
She too fine. She gets style. Her voice now dies. My baby, oh my sweetheart of radio.
Alright, welcome back to Oma's Diary. Were you able to remember or recall what you could be doing at 82, or even if you're going to be alive at 82? Because honestly, it is such a gift. It's such an amazing blessing to be alive at 82, and not just alive at 82, but alive and well and coordinating official activities. What am I talking about? Who am I talking about? I'm talking about the MTN Media Innovation Program Fellows visit to the former president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki. Amazing. We were at Thabo Mbeki Foundation and we had this very inspiring conversation with him, where the fellows were given the opportunity to ask him questions, and a lot of fellows did ask him questions on different issues. Of course, I will play the interview for you to take a listen. But you know, the interesting part of the whole thing, I couldn't help but admire the former president, His Excellency Thabo Mbeki, his wit, his wisdom, the fact that at 82 he is strong, his mind is excellent, the fact that he still carries on his official engagement, the fact that he is so agile. Come on, that is a huge blessing that every one of us should always look out for. And I was truly inspired. And I kept asking myself, I kept wondering within myself, you know, apart from all the conversations that we had that day, I looked at myself at 82. I saw the younger me, like the 82-year-old me. You know how it is, 82-year-old me. And I'm just wondering what I'll be doing at 82 if His Excellency is still so agile, so young at 82. Imagine that. His ability to answer questions, his ability to provide answers, you know, the rich conversation. It was amazing. Now take a listen to this conversation we had with His Excellency, the former president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki. Take a listen to this conversation and you will agree with me that it's indeed a huge blessing to be 82. And I would really say thank you to His Excellency for that rich conversation, because I'm here. A lot of persons ask questions, but here am I being inspired at the fact that at 82, he still goes about his official engagement. That's a huge blessing. The first person to ask question was Chiemelie Ezobi, who is the group features editor with This Day newspaper, and others followed suit. Take a listen to this.
So my question is, having been most of some of African countries in the continent, one of the issues I find quite impacting is that issue of lack of seamless border. It cost you an arm and a leg to buy a flight ticket from Nigeria to another country. That's why we talk about the issue of visa procurement. So my question is that how do we ensure a seamless border? Because I know about the free trade zone that is still dragging up to this moment. How do we ensure a seamless border between African countries so that if I decide to travel, you talked about the AU passport, if I decide to wake up and travel to South Africa the next day, I won't have to go through any hassles to get there. That's my question, sir. Thank you.
I don't know how we want to do about that. The part of the problem that I see is a decline in commitment to a Pan Africanist view on the continent. That sense of a strong Pan Africanism among our political leadership is kind of receded. And so when you raise this matter about movement of Africans among themselves, you are talking to people who no longer have that very strong sense of a Pan-African common belonging. It's a problem. We discussed this question in this country about the rules and regulations this country has with regard to other people, Africans in the first instance. It's a battle to convince the people who actually practically handle this thing every day to say, but you need a system which encourages interaction among the Africans, not to exclude people, but to include. So it's related, I'm saying, to the politically what has happened on the continent is a regression from the kind of Pan-Africanist commitment that you had with other earlier leaders on the continent. And the weakening of that resolve has negative consequences like this one, of people tightening or visa regulations so that it becomes very difficult to cross borders. It's a larger political problem. And how you address it, I think, is to address the larger political problem. So what we've been discussing. The point that was being made earlier about the relationship among the artists, Nigerian, South African artists, and what they are able to do was correct. In a sense, we need to look at that to say, I know the Nigerian business people for many years have been very keen to have established a similar relationship with South African business and have not been terribly successful in exciting sufficient of the South African, from MTN and these others, sufficient of a South African view among the business community to respond to the kind of enthusiasm that was on the Nigerian side about this. And I think if you went from sector to sector, it would be the same, and maybe that's what we need to do. If these various communities in both countries engage each other in the way that artists are saying artists have engaged one another, maybe that might help to make it easier for people to communicate, because to move. because they've established a particular kind of relationship. But he was saying that he doesn't want it. There are some of the big countries that are reluctant about this. And he said he didn't want to be honest. One of the big ones is this one. Real difficulties about getting people to understand that the matter about movement among the freer the movement among the Africans, the better for everybody. Yeah. It's very difficult to market the idea. Easier to market the idea. No, these ones are coming to take our jobs. So keep them out.
Your Excellency, good evening, everyone. My name is Stephen Ambulu. I write for the Punch newspapers. Thank you for that brilliant conversation you had earlier and how you were open with these matters. I appreciate your openness to us as journalists. In July of this year, I was in Abeokuta at a town hall meeting with your very good friend, His Excellency President Obasanjo, and he was engaging, this time not journalists, but young Africans from over 40 countries that were brought together by the Oni of Ife back in Nigeria. And one of the things he kept emphasizing was that was the cause of some of these issues we are here talking about today, is the poor handling of diversity within these African countries and even amongst each other. And I just wanted to ask, in your days as president, we understand that South Africa has quite a few tribes, and Nigeria, we also have, I think we're many, over 250 tribes. How were you able to manage the issue of identity differences? Because all of these issues, this blockade, all comes down to differing identity, sense of identity. Because I believe that when we begin to see ourselves as one Africa, these problems begin to reduce in intensity. How were you able to manage this diversity in Africa, and how would you advise leaders today to manage this diversity? Thank you very much, sir.
Well, it's a very political thing. That management of diversity, it's because it's central to the survival of all of the African states. Because there's no African state which is not characterized by the diversity of its population now. And so if you want to keep this country together, this is one country, one nation, as it were, it's got to be a conscious political decision. If you take, for instance, the one outstanding example in this regard is Tanzania. Because before we got to Tanzania, when it was Tanganyika, they take very important decisions under Julius Nyerere there. One of them was about language, that everybody must speak Kiswahili. So everybody speaks Kiswahili. So it doesn't matter whatever your language, your own mother tongue is the second language. And the second thing was in reality the abolition of the institution of chieftainship. So there's no chief of this tribe. These people don't. These were conscious decisions taken by the political leadership then of the Tanganyika African National Union. We want to build one nation out of these Tanganyikans. Two things you must do. No loyalty to a tribal chief. And no separation among us because of language. And it's worked. There's no sense in Tanzania of these identities, tribal. The matter arose quite in the recent past, in the last 10 years, let us say, where some political people in Tanzania started resurrecting this matter about tribal identity in order to advance their own political futures. But fortunately, I think the notion that we're all Tanzanian together, not identified by this, was strong enough to defeat that. So that's why I'm saying it's a political decision. Here, the South Africa is very fortunate in that respect, because you know the diamond mines, diamonds, were first discovered in the 19th century, at some point. And the mining industry, right from its beginning, attracted people from Southern Africa. From as far afield as Angola, they'd come here and so on. And then, of course, gold mining comes a bit later, same. The consequence of that is that even domestically, you have a lot of movement of people. The way the socio-economic development results in, my first name is Thabo. Thabo is a Sotho name. It's one of the tribes. But Mbeki is Zulu or Xhosa. So you'll find this. This is because my mother is Sotho, my father is whatever. I'm saying that you've got that in this country. Then secondly, you had the formation of the African National Congress in 1912. And one of its principal slogans was to bury the demon of tribalism. So since the beginning of the 20th century, you've had a political organization whose task was to make sure that all of the Southern come together. So that you see, you go to a point before liberation here. If you said in 1960, to the African community, wherever you are in the country, you say, who's your national leader? They would say, Albert Luthuli. The reason because Albert Luthuli was president of the ANC. So those presidents of the ANC become the national leaders without people being members of the ANC. All Africans could recognize that this is our national leader. So that's why people like Mandela and so these were national leaders, not just ANC. But what I'm trying to say to you is that the way this country developed was such that that diversity didn't serve as a point of division. The regime tried to do that when it set up what was called Bantustans, a Zulu Bantustan, a Xhosa Bantustan, a Pedi Bantustan, and so on. It failed. The experiment failed. Because the notion that we are South Africa together were not all of these things had become well entrenched. But that's a peculiar South African experience. But elsewhere on the continent, it requires, I'm saying, a political decision. To say we are this diverse society. Cameroon, you know the problems of Cameroon now. It's exactly that problem. The absence of a political leadership that's going to say we're Cameroonian, never mind that originally French and British and all that, we're Cameroonians. How do we make sure that this unity in diversity becomes important? That's a political decision. So that's a challenge we all have, to make sure that at least that kind of understanding on the continent persists. If it doesn't, then you are faced all the time with weak states that are in conflict, inevitably. But as I say, that's something that you have to deal with on a country-to-country basis.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Nifrani?
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Thank you for speaking from the heart and remaining so passionate about the continent. all these years. I want you to speak to the vision of an African reconnaissance that you've been preaching over the years. Since your days as deputy president, your contribution to building NEPAD, and also your introduction of peer review mechanism as inaugural chair of African Union. It's been 30 years now. What's your assessment of that vision? And what new shape do you think that vision must take in the coming decade?
Thank you.
You know, those programs remain, fortunately. NEPAD, peer review, and presumably therefore the sentiment that drove those programs remains on the continent. He mentioned President Konare as the chair of the commission, the first chair of the commission of the AU. The headquarters of NEPAD was here. It actually still remains here to some extent. And President Konare insisted that it must remain here. It's a Pan African development program of the AU, but its head must be headquartered here. He resisted during all the time he was chair of the AU Commission that the headquarters should move to Addis. And his argument was, you move this headquarters to Addis Ababa, you'll kill it. It will be absorbed by the bureaucracy of the AU in Addis Ababa and will sink. So, but there are certain changes that have happened. In reality, I don't know whether it's half or 3/4 of the AE of the NEPAD was taken to Addis after he left. And I think you can see the consequences of it. There's even they changed the name. Somebody said at the time they were considering the name they were using, they said, we're using the example of the UNDP. It must be a development program like the UNDP. And I was saying it's a bad example. UNDP is no money, there's no resources. But I think there has been, again, as I was saying on the issue of Pan Africanism, I think there's been a regression with regard to those programs because of this Pan African, the distancing of people from this notion and vision of a Pan Africanism, which is fed also by this weakness we're talking about at the AU Commission, which should have been the body, institution on the continent, which should be driving this perspective of African unity, every day, full time, but they're not doing that. The programs are still there, but I think weakened, and we need to revisit them, to reinvigorate. But I think in the context of a strengthened commitment to the Pan-African perspective. And the media is very important in strengthening that perspective. And then refocusing here, some of the discussion to get some of our people here is, we, at a certain point, we had an African Renaissance movement across the continent with branches and so on, and what's happened to it. Let's resurrect that so that the people themselves take up this matter, this Pan-Africanist matter of the Renaissance of Africa. So there's some discussion among some of our people here, including at this foundation. So I'm saying the institutions and the processes and programs are still there, but I think in terms of their profile, it's gone down in terms of the work of the AU.
Thank you very much.
sir, for the honor and privilege to be in your presence. But I have a question on, and my name is Nkechi Obona. I am a journalist with the British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC. My question, sir, Your Excellency, is on insecurity in West Africa. Now, we had thought that the era of military takeovers had been a thing of the past in the 90s, but we have seen the Sahel region, including Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and most recently in Gabon. Military officers have taken over power from democratically elected presidents. Now, I would like you to just speak to what you think, first off, is the reason for these takeovers. Secondly, we have also seen these countries sever ties with former colonies like France. What this means for democracy, what this means for international relations, and also the crisis in Sudan, where we have seen the two generals at loggerheads, and which has thrown millions of people in Africa's worst humanitarian crisis in recent years. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
You know, the 2005, it must be, I think, 2004, 5, 6, around that time, we were asked by the AU to engage the Ivorians, Cote d'Ivoire, to sort out the problems there. And one of the things that I discovered there is a very bad thing. For instance, the agreements with France, one of the agreements was that there would be a French military base in Abidjan. And the commander of the French military base would have a mandate to look after the security, national security interests of both of Cote d'Ivoire and France. As a consequence of which, the commander of the French troops in Abidjan, whenever the circumstances developed such that he felt that his national security interests were being under threat, he could take over radio and television. Without reference to the president of Cote d'Ivoire or anything. Empowered by the agreement signed in 1960 as Cote d'Ivoire became independent, just to take over the country. It's one of the agreements. Now there are something like 10, 12 of these agreements, which France entered into with the former Francophone countries. So, as you'll have seen, these young soldiers in Francophone West Africa, one of their great heroes is Thomas Sankara. The reason for that is because they are rebelling against the colonial relations that continue to exist. That we've got to break with these relations so that we can genuinely say this country is truly independent. So part of what happens is that here is a Thabo Mbeki who is elected president in some countries, but is very much in the pockets of the French. So the soldiers, in rebelling against French neocolonialism, they will also rebel against this political representative of French colonialism in their country. So you get your military coups, and you might protest democracy. But me, I would applaud an anti-colonial stance by the soldiers. That's what is happening in West Africa. You see in Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea-Conakry, Gabonian maybe. It's a political rebellion against an old France-Afrique relationship. I'm saying it was still persisting. I do not know if that French base has been removed from Abidjan. I think it's still there. Whether the conditions of its existence have changed, I don't know. So I think you can't avoid, well, let me put it in another way. I went to one of these, well, I won't mention the name of the country. I went to this country once, I was still in government. And then when I was leaving, a minister, I was given a minister to take me to the airport and see me off nicely. So as we were driving, we were talking over here. So he says to me, he wants to give me his business card. President, in case you come back, can you just look for me because we're having such a good discussion and so on. So he gives me the card, which I put in his pocket and off we leave. In the air as we're flying, I take it out. It's got his name, minister, contact details at home. The flip side, same, except in Paris. Same name, minister, but all the addresses are in Paris. This is an African minister. And he thinks it's normal, he can give me this card, it's fine. Who will end up as a president.
Wow.
And the soldiers were going to say, we're rebelling against the French. So we rebel against this democratically elected French representatives. Yeah. So that's part of what is happening in West Africa, and I think it can't be avoided. And it's a correct thing to rebel against French colonialism. How the matter of the restoration of democracy is handled is something that indeed can be discussed. I don't think those soldiers are instinctively anti-democratic. But they are addressing a different problem. And it's a real problem. The Sudan thing is in a sense, it's an institutional problem. You got the Republican Army, armed forces, like any other. And then you had a tribal militia, which was used during the time that there was a rebellion in the Darfur region against the central government. So the central government, in addition to the army, used the militia to fight against that rebellion. Later, President Bashir takes that militia and by law or decree or whatever, constitutes it as a second army. So you got the Republican Army and the militia are then given all of whatever constitutes an army. So you've got two armies. In Sudan, and the Sudanese army has got serious interest in the economy. It's not just a military formation with guns and whatever else. It's also very active in terms of the Sudanese economy. And of course, militia were constituted into an official military formation, are also interested in the same thing. I'm saying you're bound to have a clash, institutional clash. The army, the Sudanese armed forces are insisting that what are now called the rapid support forces, that's all militias, need to be integrated within the Sudanese National Defense Force. And they made a proposal that process of integration could be effected within a period of 3 years or something. And the Rapid Support Force were saying, no, that is too quick. Give it 10 years. So now you have got this coexistence of these two armed groups. And the clash started. Now, how to resolve it, I don't know. We are engaged naturally. The African Union asked me in 2009 to lead a group to help to resolve the conflict in Darfur. That was 2009. So since 2009, I've been working on Sudan. So the result is that I know many people in Sudan, they know me. As a consequence of which, then there is naturally pressure from many Sudanese to say, you know us, you know our problems, why don't you come and help? So when Max talks about you people must come back in October, that's part of what we talk about. It will deal with the Sudan problem, that meeting. It must. But it's a clash between these two armed forces. As of now, each one is convinced that a military solution is possible because I will defeat you. But whether in fact it is possible, I don't know, the military. But it's very destructive. We'll try our best from here to see if we can help to resolve that problem. All efforts, as you know, up to now have failed. But fortunately, all of the players in Sudan, both military things as well as the civilian society, at least they have a relationship with us here. So it becomes possible for us to talk and interact with everybody concerned. And the best we can do is to try. The military solution, I think, is very difficult. But all
Thank you, Excellency. I think that Lucky has a final short question.
Your Excellency, I wish we could be here till daybreak. In fact, if it were possible, we should just cancel all our engagements and stay with you. Just to provide a little background, sir. What I'm going to ask you, we will put it on tape for a documentary. And the question is really about the role of the media. You mentioned it in passing, but I would like for you to be a little bit more detailed on what you think the media can do, considering all that you have done, the foundation that yourself and other leading lights in Pan Africanism have done to establish the systems that you have built. But those systems appear to be, like you've mentioned, they've been weakened. What do you think the media can do? Because we have journalists, and the reason we instituted this program, the MTN Media Innovation Program, is because we thought that the media is powerful, and each practitioner, if they realize the power that they have, they are able to change the narrative, starting with the Nigerian-South African relations. Because we believe that if the two countries are strong, and not just economically strong, but if they have good relationship, it will translate to the rest of Africa. So what do you think the role of the media is right now, sir?
Well, I would imagine that before we become media people, we are Africans first. And I would imagine that therefore the continent, as you know, I think generally the African people across the continent have certain objectives about themselves. The notion of African unity, I think, is shared by Africans across the group, across the continent. We are one people, maybe different languages and so on, but we say we share a common destiny. So let's work together. What does the media do to encourage that sentiment? And I think it's related to how do we report ourselves to ourselves? Yesterday I was at, day before yesterday I was at a school, a girls' school in Pretoria. It's a big school. And one of our people says to me, "No, but why are you attending to this school? Because it's a white school." So this is South Africa. I was very surprised because that school is 90% black. He didn't know. Lives in Johannesburg and say 50 kilometers from here. He has a notion that this school remains during the apartheid days was a white school. But it's changed. I'm saying within South Africa. Now imagine what happens across our borders. So the South African, I think your visit here is important. The South African, the media, the African media needs to know Africa. Not to be informed about Africa by somebody else, Reuters or whoever, in order to report accurately about the continent, the bad and the good. But I think to take on board also these common sentiments among the peoples of Africa. I mean, when we talk about the renaissance of the continent, that will resonate across the borders. A rebirth of our continent, so a new continent born afresh. No longer conflict, no longer poverty, no longer any of these negative things. But I think the media has a very important role to develop that kind of consciousness. That kind of consciousness which, among other things, deal with some of the issues that were raised, the issue of unity in diversity. Within countries, across countries. I'm saying that's a shared sentiment among the Africans across the borders. What does the media do to encourage that? So I think the continent needs to move forward with regard to these matters. Free movement of people, better cooperation. If I want to develop it, we can't develop on our own. It must be mutual. I can only develop because you are also developing. So how do we cooperate? The media has the possibility and the strength to encourage this common sentiment, common consciousness across our borders, so that at least the population, the people, this 1.5 billion, whatever, however many we are, in a common direction, broadly, so that it becomes possible then to resolve the issues of interstate relations and so on, because the atmosphere would be of that kind. So I think the media has an important role to play that. It's not to invent new perspectives, new objectives, new wishes. It's to reinforce what the Africans themselves wish for themselves. And I think the media can play a very important role with regard to that.
Thank you, sir.
Wow! Amazing, prolific, awesome, great. Now you understand why I said I was definitely inspired, motivated. It became a catalyst amongst all that he said. The role of the media in telling African stories. We need to tell our stories by ourselves, because indeed, only us can truly tell our stories. Once again, I truly say thank you so much to His Excellency Thabo Mbeki, the former President of South Africa, for hosting the MTN-MIP Fellows Cohort 3. My name is Chioma Chinyere Chukwemeka, also known as Oma Sweetheart on radio, TV, social media, sweetheart everywhere. Feel free to share the podcast and comment and let me know exactly what you think. See you in my next podcast. I love you. Bye-bye.
She too fine. She gets stars. Her voice now dies. My baby, 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 you're my sweet out of radio.